students, welcome to another session of English. In today's video, we are going to talk about an inspiring and interesting story of your literature reader book, that is chapter number 1, Boyhood Days. Now, whose boyhood days are talked about in the chapter? The boyhood days of the author Booker T. Washington. Now, who was Booker T. Washington? Booker T. Washington, who was born in 1856 and died in 1915, was an African American writer, leader, and educator. Now, this chapter is an excerpt. Excerpt means it is an extract taken from Up from the Slavery. Now, Up from the Slavery is an autobiography of an American educator, Booker T. Washington. Now, this chapter has been taken from the autobiography of the author Booker T. Washington. So, the part of the autobiography we are going to read in this chapter that talks about the boyhood days of the author. Now, as the autobiography name is Up from the Slavery, so it is very clear from this that the author was born to a slave mother, right? Now, who is a slave? A slave is a person who is owned by some other person and he or she has to work under his master, right? So, author's mother was a slave and she used to work in a plantation, right? She used to cook for everybody there and author was born to that lady, right? So it is clear that author was born to a slave mother who used to work at a plantation. Now, the story begins from the time after the Civil War when slaves got freedom, right, under Emancipation Proclamation. Now, what is the meaning of emancipation? Emancipation means freeing of somebody from slavery. Now, when author and his mother were emancipated, Emancipation Proclamation. Proclamation means order. So when there was order of freeing people from slavery, the story starts from that point of time. Now, at that point of time, when slaves were free, when slaves got freedom, they started wishing to begin their life. Okay. In this chapter, we'll study that in spite of facing all the hardships of life, in spite of coming across all the difficulties in life, in spite of being born to a slave mother, how the author kept his spirits high and achieved success to become a prominent personality. Right? In this chapter, we are going to talk about 4 phases of author's life. The first phase, that is slavery, then comes work life, then his education time, and how he became a prominent leader. Okay, so we will learn how in spite of being there in unfavorable conditions, he managed to work hard, he managed to be determined and achieve his goals of life. So this chapter is basically an inspiration for all the readers who are reading his autobiography or who are reading the excerpt today from his autobiography, Boyhood Days. So let us begin with the chapter now. The story is set at the time of Emancipation Proclamation. Emancipation Proclamation means when the slaves were given freedom. Okay, when the freedom was declared to the slaves and they were set free. Now, when there was Emancipation Proclamation, the author was at the age of 9. What was the age of Booker T. Washington that time? He was 9 years old. And children, they decided on 2 things. Now, when the slaves got freedom, they decided on 2 things to do. What were those 2 things? Number 1 was changing their names, and number 2 was leaving the plantation for some time. Now, why did they decide to change their names and leave the plantation? They decided to do both these things because they wanted to feel what exactly the freedom is. Now what used to happen that time was that the slaves were not they did not have any identity. For example, if a slave is a colored person and the slave name is John, okay, and the master who is a white person and master's name is Hatcher, so the name of the slave will be John Hatcher. So they were given the name after their name, the name of their master, right? So that is why they wanted to have their own identity and they wanted to change their names and leave that plantation so that they could enjoy the air of freedom. Now, as soon as freedom was declared, they shifted to a place where his stepfather worked at that time. Now, who does they refer to? They here refers to author's mother and the author. Now, what happened after freedom was declared? After they were set free, they shifted to some other place where his stepfather used to work. Now, stepfather was not living with them at plantation. Why? Because the father and mother were not enslaved to the same master. So, stepfather lived somewhere else. And after the freedom was declared, the father called them there. And they went to Kanawha Valley in West Virginia. So they shifted from Virginia to West Virginia, Kanawha Valley. Right. Now, this journey from Virginia to West Virginia was a very difficult and painful journey for the author and his mother. Now, why was it difficult? Because it was a long distance and on the cart, their things were there, the goods were there, and the children were supposed to walk on foot. So that was a very tiring and painful journey taken by the author and his mother. And finally, after a lot of efforts, they reached Malden. Now, Malden is a little town that was their destination, right? And when the author and his mother were moving to Malden, the small town, on the way they had to sleep in open area and there was no cooking. There was cooking, but everything was done outdoors only. So taking a lot of pain and making a lot of efforts, finally they reached to a small town, Malden. And when they reached Malden, they were given a small cabin over there. Small cabin means the room that was given to them was not like the room that they had at plantation. It was a very small cabin because the cabin was made among the clusters of cabin, and that even did not have proper sanitary conditions. The condition was not at all good, right? And in the cluster of cabins, everywhere there was complete filth means the dirt, right? And it was intolerable. They were not able to bear that smell, that filth, and that unhealthy surroundings that they were sent to. And the neighbors who were there, right, they all were colored people. Colored means the people who are not white, and everybody used to quarrel and fight. So the atmosphere overall was not healthy and good for them, right? And then what happened? The stepfather had put the author to work. Author was sent by his stepfather to work in a salt furnace to earn some money, right? To earn their living. Though the author was very small, he was at a very tender age, his brother and he were sent to a salt furnace to earn their living. Right. Now, what happened at his work life? Now, when he was working in salt furnace, the author had a desire to study. He wanted to learn how to read. He was determined that if he could achieve nothing in life, at least he could attain that much education that he is able to read newspapers. Now, he thought of sharing his view with his mother, and he induced his mother. He told his mother to get some books for him. And mother, as mothers always do everything for their children, some or the other way she managed to get some books for author, and with the support of his mother, he could arrange an alphabet book and started learning without a teacher, right? Then he mastered a great portion of the alphabet on his own. He made a lot of effort to study without the teacher. After some time, the author realized that he wanted a teacher. It was difficult for him to study on his own anymore. And the colored people of the town also realized that their children needed a teacher to get educated. Now, among all these discussions, there was a colored soldier who came to that town, and he became the teacher of those colored children, because no white person was ready to teach a colored child. So then education system began there, and the teacher was arranged with great difficulty, right? Then it was decided that the teacher would go to one child per day, and the maximum comfort will be given to that teacher. So every day the teacher will go to one child's house to teach him, and the people thought of providing the maximum comfort to the teacher, right? And then after some time, not only children, the older people also wanted to get education, right? So not only day school, night schools were also full of pupils. Now, why the old people wanted to seek education, why they wanted to learn? Because they thought that they should learn to read Bible before they die. So that is why they also had keen desire to be educated, right? Now, this was not the end of the chapter, children. This is not the end of the entire story. After the author got a teacher and he started studying, the difficulties got more in his life. The difficulties started coming in his life, right? Now, the most important, the keenest disappointment that the author had to face was that his father did not allow him to study, because he wanted him to earn for the family. But the author was determined to attain education, so he was successful in convincing his father that he'll be managing work also apart from going to school. So somehow he was successful in arranging his night lessons with the teacher, and the teacher started teaching him at night. But then he thought that other children went during the daytime to the school, so he thought of going to school, and somehow he managed that also, that after work immediately he used to go to school to seek his lessons. Now, when he went to day school, he faced two difficulties at school. Now, what were those difficulties? The first difficulty that he faced at school was that he did not have cap or hat on his head like other children. So he felt separated from the other children. He felt that others are in uniform and he is not. So he shared his heart out again with his mother, and author's mother was a strong lady. She did not have any money to buy that cap, but she herself made it for the author, and then author became the proud owner of that cap, right? And then the second difficulty that he faced at school was that the children had at least two names. When he went to school, he found that everybody had two names, but a name and a surname, but he was only called Booker, right? And it was necessary to register in the school with at least two names. And when the teacher asked him that what his second name was, so he immediately replied that my name is Booker Washington. He himself added Washington to his name, as if he have been through his entire life called by this name, right? And then later he came to know that he was named as Taliaferro by his mother, so he added that also to his name, and finally his full name became Booker Taliaferro Washington. So Washington he added on his own, and Taliaferro was the name given to him by his mother. So finally his full name was Booker Taliaferro Washington. That is why in short we write Booker T. Washington. So these were the hardships that he faced in the school, and he overcame all the difficulties, all the struggles that came across his life. The author got a privilege of naming himself in his own way, and not many people have this privilege in the world, right? And then by the end of the chapter, the author shares that he just talks about his feelings about race and ancestry. He says that colored people have to face a lot of discouragement, lot of difficulties, lot of obstacles in life, right? So he says that people should not pass judgment upon the colored child. He further shares that a white child only has to focus on his goals. Nobody says anything to him. But a colored child has to face a lot of discouragement everywhere, right? So he conveys a message to the people that one should not be one should not be judgmental about somebody's race or color, right? Everybody is the same. So the basic message that we get from the story is that in spite of obstacles, in spite of hardships of life, you need to work hard, you need to overcome in order to become successful. So that was all, children, about the chapter in short, right? The detailed study has been done in the live classes. I hope you all have attended that. Read the chapter once again. If you come across any problems, then please do share. So that's all for today, children. Have a nice day.